So take a good hard look at yourself, Netanyahu, because you are the biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East, bar none. There's no competition at this point.
This meeting between Trump and Netanyahu is closed to the press for now. Could change, as always, with this president, but two sources tell ABC News that Netanyahu will personally present the latest Israeli intelligence to the president on Iran's efforts to rebuild its ballistic missile program and nuclear program.
Welcome back, folks, and buckle up. We're diving headfirst into a transcript that got more twists and turns than a California highway at rush hour. The speaker here is really going for it, laying out some pretty wild claims about Israel, Iran, and American foreign policy. We're going to hit the pause button on some of these hot takes, dissect the arguments, and see if they hold up to even a casual sniff test. Get ready for some truth bombs and a healthy dose of common sense, because what you're about to hear needs a serious reality check. Let's roll the tape.
This is the Israeli government pressing their case that not only should that nuclear program be the focus of the talks, but also there should be other red lines which the US should extract demands from the Iranians on, namely the ballistic missile program that Israel says Iran has already started to rebuild.
Not only is Israel's intelligence for the United States so worthless that it's not worth the paper it's printed on, Iran's missile capabilities are not of importance to the United States. They can't reach the United States. Iran has no interest in actually harming us. And so I just want to understand, why do we care about what Netanyahu or the Israelis have to say about Iran at all?
Hold on a minute. Iran's missile capabilities are not of importance to the United States? Are we living in the same world? This is the kind of selective amnesia that drives me absolutely bonkers. It's like saying a rattlesnake in your backyard isn't important because it hasn't bitten you yet. Iran, a regime that actively chants death to America, they also fund terrorist proxies across the Middle East, is developing ballistic missiles. To suggest that doesn't concern the global powers responsible for stability in the region is being naive. It's dangerously ignorant. Their missiles might not reach our soils today, but proxy wars, naval blockades, and threats to our allies are very real. Geopolitical threats aren't just about direct hits. They're about regional dominance and the erosion of the American influence. Ignoring that is how you end up with bigger problems down the line.
And that's not just me saying it. Here is mega Zionist Robert Greenway from the Heritage Foundation. If you're unfamiliar with him, he's one of the ghouls who negotiated the Abraham Accords in order to normalize Israel's depravity with Arab countries. Here's what he has to say about Iran's missile capabilities.
And certainly Iran does not have the capacity to adequately threaten the United States, but it's not completely defenseless. And I think that's why additional assets may be required and may be on their way into the theater. Midnight Hammer took the nuclear program off the table, so the ballistic missile program is all that they've got left. And that, of course, remains a target that both Israel and the United States, and frankly, the region should be interested in eliminating. And once that happens, Iran is no longer the principal threat in the region, and we're in a new Middle East. And I think that's the horizon that both the president and the prime minister are steering towards.
So Iran's missiles are not a threat to the United States, but as you just heard the gentleman say, Iran has defense capabilities, and we should be concerned about that. Why? Why would we be so concerned about that we would risk the lives of our soldiers and use our resources to engage in war with Iran? Now, look, we're not dumb, obviously, right? We know what's going on here. We know that war with Iran would happen at the behest of Israel. That's the whole point here. That is the reason why Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who was supposed to meet with Trump next week, begged to have his meeting moved up so he could meet with Trump today. And that's what happened this morning. He did meet with Trump. I am assuming to goad him into fighting a war on Israel's behalf. And since Trump is Israel's bitch, much like previous presidents, Democrats and Republicans, he'll probably give Bibi what he wants.
Whoa. Israel's bitch? Really? That's the level of diplomatic analysis we're getting? Look, I get it. Criticizing foreign policy is fair game. But reducing the complex relationship between two sovereign nations to such a crude, quite frankly, I will say offensive insult just shows a profound lack of understanding. Or maybe it's just a deliberate attempt to inflame. Unfortunately, it's a classic playbook. If you don't like a policy, just shout, Israel controls America. That's lazy, and frankly, it's an old anti Semitic trope rehashed for the modern era. Presidents, whether are Democrat or Republican, make decisions based on what they perceive to be in America's strategic interest, not because they're bitches to anyone. There are legitimate debates to be had about aid and alliances, but resorting to this kind of language is a cheap shot that bypasses any actual substance.
Nonetheless, the prime minister is back in town. And here is what I think is really interesting here. So, according to the Jerusalem Post, they write, quote, I will present Trump with principles for negotiations with Iran that are important, not only to Israel, but to everyone who wants peace and security, Netanyahu said, while boarding Wing of Zion, Israel's state aircraft. In my opinion, these are important principles for everyone who wants peace and security in the Middle East. Peace and security in the Middle East would require Israel to be put in its place. Israel is the biggest threat to not just peace in the Middle East, but peace on this planet. So take a good hard look at yourself, Netanyahu, because you are the biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East, bar none. There's no competition at this point. Now, ahead of Netanyahu's visit, Trump bragged about sending more US military capabilities to the region. Take a look at that.
We have a massive flotilla right now going over to Iran. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal. I think they'd be foolish if they didn't. I would say that I'd rather make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. No nuclear weapons, no missiles, no this, no that, all the different things that you want.
So, in other words, Trump is saying that he intends to send a second carrier strike group to the Middle East in preparation for war with Iran. And regardless of what Barack Ravid might have to say over at Axios, he wants us all to believe that there's daylight between Trump and Netanyahu. That's actually not the case at all. Here is more reporting from the Jerusalem Post. There are no significant gaps between Israel and the United States on negotiations with Iran. U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, told the Jerusalem Post at Ben Gurion Airport before the Tuesday departure, meaning before Netanyahu left Israel on Tuesday to come persuade Trump to spill American blood and use American treasure on behalf of Israel. So that's the reality of the situation. Now, what do I mean when I say there's no daylight between the two? Trump likes to talk out of both sides of his mouth. It's the most annoying thing in the world, but I think the best way to handle that is out of the two things he's saying, which one is worse? That's the one he actually means. And so when he starts, his tough talk about how he's gonna crush Iran, that's what he actually means. Now, remember, this all started with the Israelis pretending like they were very worried about their safety, very scared about Iran potentially building nuclear weapons. Obama secures the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, to ensure that Iran is not building nuclear weapons. Trump comes in 2018, rips it up, and suddenly we're hearing about the Israelis and how they want to move the goalposts. It's not just about nuclear war anymore that they're worried about. Now they're worried about missiles. Now, initially, Trump wasn't persuaded that it made sense to go to war with Iran because they have ballistic missiles. But lately, if you listen carefully to what he says, he does want to, get Iran to essentially give away their only defensive capability. So what? Israel can do whatever it wants in the region. And so the Iranians are like, no, our ballistic missiles are off the table. Thank you. We want to focus on the nuclear negotiations. And that's what allegedly took place between Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and the Iranians this past weekend. They didn't reach a deal. But what's amazing to me is that now it's not just about the nuclear weapons or the missiles. There's something else the Israelis want the Iranians to give up. But before we do, I got to show you this video of former US ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, losing it in her pants over the idea of going to war with Iran. Take a look.
This is a legacy-defining moment for President Trump. Iran has never been weaker than they are right now. The key at the end of the day is no nuclear enrichment, no more ballistic missile or drone activity.
You hear that? Nuclear weapons. Oh, you signed the JCPOA. Israel doesn't want peace. They want to go to war. They want regime change. Move the goalposts. Now it's nuclear weapons and missiles. By the way, Iran has not agreed to do anything that the West wants in regard to their missiles. But as you just heard from Nikki Haley, now drones are also included in this matter. So explain to me, if you could take a step back, whatever biases you might have in relation to this story, put it aside for 1 second and ask yourself, put yourself in the shoes of the Iranians. Would you think that the West is negotiating with you in good faith? Would you trust the West? Would you trust the United States? Because I wouldn't. And throughout everything that has happened, Iran is still willing to come to the table and try to reach a deal. I think any good faith that any country might have toward the US is just being destroyed every single day with these gross games that are being played. So even before meeting with Trump today, the Jerusalem Post reported that Netanyahu met with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, plotting, of course, because they don't want peace, guys. I really do think that so far Trump had been saving time because he had used up so much of our military capabilities in the Caribbean, giving weapons to Ukraine. Obviously, we've given a massive stockpile of weaponry to Israel as well. I mean, are we ready to go to war? I doubt it. So I think that there's a lot of buying time taking place right now as we speak. I think that the war is inevitable. I really do. But I do want to just say one other thing, because look, the Israelis always get their way. They've bought our politicians or blackmailed them. So what happens if we're able to get through that war without too many of our soldiers dying? If we're able to, now we've already done a lot of damage to our debt, so it'll definitely get worse. But what happens after that? Will Israel finally shut the hell up and leave us alone? And the answer to that is no. And I turn to Colonel Douglas McGregor, who was actually a foreign policy advisor to Trump in his first term. Obviously, he no longer is. But nonetheless, here he is talking about what comes next after Iran during his conversation on Deep Dive with Daniel Davis.
What Americans need to understand, and I think people in the Middle East are beginning to figure out, is this is not the last step in the march to total and complete security, which equates to Israeli Jewish supremacy in the region, or Israeli hegemony, however you want to put it. This is not the last step, because once you have successfully destroyed Iran, you will have to turn your attentions to the destruction of Turkey. Now, Turkey, as they call it now, is standing on the sidelines, but they're not stupid. They understand what's really happening. They understand what Israel's goals are, and they've already concluded, I think, that they are inevitably going to come to blows with Israel.
That is true. And I know it's true because of what I read in Israeli publications, because I pay attention to what Israeli politicians say out loud in Hebrew, but it's transcribed and I know what they're saying. They're already fear-mongering about Turkey. And you think Israel is going to go to war with Turkey on its own? I mean, it can't go to war with the Houthis on its own. Israel would cease to exist without the US bankrolling that country and providing arms to that country. So buckle up, America. Unless we defeat this Zionist regime that looks down their noses at us and just uses us as their ATM machines.
All right, stop the press. Defeat the Zionist regime and calling the United States Israel's ATM machine? Really? This isn't just an opinion. It's bordering a full-blown conspiracy theory. The idea that Israel is some puppet master regime pulling America's strings for perpetual war is not only outlandish, but technically it's deeply concerning to me. Let's be clear. Israel is an ally, a democratic beacon in a very volatile region. They face constant existential threats. To frame them as the sole architects of Americans' foreign policy, using us as their personal piggy bank, completely ignoring the geopolitical realities or our own national interests and the myriad of other factors influencing U.S. decisions, it's a dangerous narrative that absolutes other actors of responsibility. It paints one of our closest allies as the ultimate villain. It's a convenient way of calling somebody the boogeyman. But you know what? It's not reality, folks.
We're just going to be in perpetual war on their behalf until there's nothing left in this country. We're already $38 trillion in debt. We can't afford this. We shouldn't do this, but we're going to do it anyway because our system is corrupt, our politicians are bought, and we are not governed by the people that we elected. We're actually governed by the people who bought them. That's the reality.
All right, folks, that was a wild ride. We've heard some truly eye-opening takes today, from dismissing critical missile threats to painting our allies as puppet masters. It's critical we approach these discussions with open minds, but also with a healthy dose of skepticism and also a commitment to facts. But don't let emotional charged rhetoric cloud your judgment about complex international relations. So tell me, what do you think? Did the speaker hit the mark, or are they way off base? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more unfiltered analysis. Let's keep this conversation going. And as always, stay vigilant, Patriots, stay vigilant.